Welcome to Spanish Tax Calculator. This is Juan Carlos Maruenda here, lawyer, expert in property law and tax advisor. I'm very pleased to collaborate with this site where we publish public and relevant information in order to help to understand Spanish tax system. We will start today with the income tax to be paid when renting a property. So let's start to talk about the different ways to rent a house in Spain. There are usually several ways to rent. The traditional way is the rent where you have a house in Spain and you decide to rent it out for medium term, for example, 2, 3, 4, 5 months, or which we call medium term. And you rent it for residents, for students, for families in medium term or in a long term. Sometimes for someone who is looking to reside in the property for periods of time, long periods of time, for example, 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, etc. And then in the recent years, it was quite common to find owners that with the easy way to marketing the properties for rent with online platforms as Airbnb, HomeAway, etc. They were interested to rent properties as for tourist license. In all these different ways of rent, at the end, the income rent must be declared for taxes with different formalities that we are very pleased to explain it right now. The first thing that we are considering is that being resident or non-resident in Spain, when you have a secondary residence that you have decided to rent, then you have to present income tax. You have to declare that rent for the income tax in Spain, that it will be the way in which to declare this income or the income tax to pay will be depending on your personal situation in Spain, depending on if you are a Spanish tax resident or in case that you are a Spanish tax non-resident. Here in our site, we have considered several calculators that will help you in both ways to calculate, to play with the different scenarios of your incomes generated by taxes in Spain. In case that you are a Spanish tax resident, we kindly invite you to enter in our calculator as for a Spanish tax resident, where obviously you will need to introduce determinate information that will determine exactly which is the amount that you will pay as for rent as resident. Why? Because this system, the incomes that you generate with the being a Spanish tax resident will be a part of your yearly income tax return, your inland revenue. So it will not be a separate specification of taxes to pay. For example, when you come, just a rapid example because it will be a part of another tutorial. For example, imagine that obviously you are receiving incomes for more than 14,000 euros per year, considering your personal salaries or pensions together with the rent. Then you go straightforward. Obviously, it will be necessary. This is the example of the income tax for residents. So it will be necessary to indicate your personal situation in Spain. If you make the declaration of this tax joint or not joint or individually, if you have descendants, for example, in case that you have one or you have two, or you have not. In case that you have disability, etc., all of these you can be deducting. But the point here is that the income tax for residents in Spain, the income tax declaration, has a section where clearly establishes the incomes or the situation in which you own the properties in Spain. In our calculator, we have included a scenario up to 3 properties in Spain. For example, an apartment with a garage, that it can be another property, and also with a shed, which can be independent properties that, or for example, 2 apartments in Spain. But for example, right now, for the example that we are considering, imagine that you are renting a house, that you have a house which is right now is used as permanent residence. In this case, you need to fill all the details of your house here. But imagine that is it being your permanent residence, you are renting. So then we will make a scenario. Imagine that you own the property 50% with your spouse, and then the cadastral value. I would like to remind you that in order to prepare the taxes in Spain, it will be very important to get the information about the cadastral value of your property. You can get the cadastral value in the council tax, the EB receipt that yearly you receive, and here there is a section here where clearly says valor catastral. So imagine that here the information that you receive on your EB receipt is 60,000 euros. So okay. And then in the Spanish tax declaration for income tax for residents, the declaration will ask you if you are renting the property and if it is long term for the tenant or is short term for the tenants. So in this case, imagine that you are renting some periods of the year with Airbnb. Then we will go to short term non-permanent resident of the tenant, because the intention of the tenant is not living on that property permanently. Imagine that you have rented the property per 100 days, and that you have obtained totally 9,000 euros, that as you are the 50% of the property, the amount of this rent that belongs to you is 4,500. Then you can deduct, as a Spanish resident, the garbage collection. I would like to inform you that right now these concepts of reduction, which are expenses related to the activity of the tax of the rent, it can reduce the tax, but proportionally to the time in which the property has been rented. In this case, the property has been rented for 100 days. So all these concepts will be considered in full, but for the declaration of the tax, it will be prorated for the 100 days that has been in activity of rent. So, okay, you don't have to prorate it. You have to include the full amount received, because this calculator will prorate automatically. So, if the bill for this year has been the full amount is 650, you have paid community of owners 1,200. The insurance for these years for the property was 650, and the electric that you have paid for the whole year has been 1,200, but you have also paid alarm, internet, cleaning for the pool, gardening, etc. You keep all these invoices, and then the full amount arrives up to 3,000. I repeat, it is not necessary for this calculator that you prorate. You just include the full amount paid for these concepts on the year. Another important point here is that if you have a Spanish mortgage with a Spanish bank, the Spanish tax system allows you to deduct the amount of interest from the mortgage that you have obtained from a Spanish bank. If you have obtained a mortgage from a bank outside Spain, then you cannot deduct this concept. So imagine that you have a mortgage in Spain from a Spanish bank, and you have paid 600 euros on interest on the year for this mortgage. You also has repaired the the freezer or the air condition or the pump of the pool. So you have total invoices for this repairing 1,200, and also you have paid a lawyer or a tax advisor to prepare your taxes in Spain. You have paid 600 euros per year. But also you have obtained the help of a real estate agent to publish or to market in your property for rent, and they have charged you 1,000 euros. So in this case, you introduce the full amount of these professional expenses, both lawyer and real estate agent. And also you have purchased a new freezer, a new refrigerator, or a washing machine, etc., with a total amount of 2,000 euros. As you see, the way in which the Spanish system reduces these costs from the final amount of taxes to pay is by amortization. There are several formulas that, depending on the concept, creates a final amount of reduction in taxes, which goes to to deduct the final amount on taxes. This is all done by the calculator. So then we get, this is the gross deductible amount from all these expenses, and the prorated one for the 100 days that the property has been rented is 2,094 euros, which can be deducted from the base of the tax, from the incomes that you receive from the rent of the property. Taking this into account, then the net rental income tax that you would the net rental income that it will be considered for the taxes in Spain will be that one. So imagine that you have not any further properties in Spain, then this will be the amount that will be considered for the section of the income tax declaration which talks about your property, your rental incomes. Then we go next. Obviously, this calculator gives you up to 3 properties. This is property number 2. Imagine that you have not for the properties, you have not further garages or whatever which are independent, considered as independent properties. So this is the total amount of incomes that you generate from your property in order to calculate the income tax. And now the system requires from you to indicate the exact amount of financial products that you receive as insurance, bonds, shares from Spain or from any other part of the world. Remember that this simulator is in case that you are a Spanish resident and you have the obligation to declare any kind of earnings or incomes that you receive not only in Spain but in the rest of the world. But imagine that this is not your case. You are not receiving financial products or earnings from shares, bonds, etc. So we move forward. So this is the tax quota that you have to pay for pensions, salary, and rentals. That's deducted from the initial personal deductions for your age, children, disability, etc., gives a final quote of the tax to pay of 2,860 euros. So this is the way in which you will be declaring your taxes for a Spanish tax resident in case for incomes received from rent. And in a separate tutorial, we will talk about taxes that you have to pay for rent obtained from Spanish properties in case that you are non-resident. Thank you for your attention, and we will see you soon.